Hi, and welcome to Be More Super, the podcast. I'm Brian, your host as always, and welcome to the show. This week's guest is straight from the 80s. It's Catherine Mary Stewart, star of Weekend at Bernie's, The Last Starfighter, and many, many other great titles. So I hope you enjoy this interview, and if you do, please hit the subscribe and the bell button. And as always, this channel is brought to you by the wonderful people at Prop Store, and they're amazing. So if you're after a screen-used prop or costume piece from your favourite TV show or film, check out their website at propstore.com. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this interview with Catherine Mary Stewart. And don't forget to hit subscribe and the bell button. So on this week's episode of Be More Super, the podcast, we've got a real treat. This lady has been in so many classic and cult movies, from Weekend at Bernie's, The Last Starfighter, The Sea Wolf, one of my favourites, and even Knight Rider. So I'm sure we're going to have a little chat about a few of her wonderful projects. It's, of course, Catherine Mary Stewart. Catherine, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
And how is everything where you are? Because you're currently in good old New York. How is everything with the pandemic? I mean, are you doing okay?
Yeah, we're doing good. I'm actually in North Carolina at the moment. I'm not in New York. I'm on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So if my connection's it looks a little iffy here. We
It's
don't
fine,
have the
it'll catch
greatest.
up.
Are you okay? It's good?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay. We don't have great internet here, unfortunately. But yeah, with the pandemic, I'm a little nervous about the new little strains of virus coming up. But so we still wear masks in public. My family, anyway, wears masks in grocery stores and things like that, in public places where people tend to get close together. But for the most part, feeling pretty good, completely vaccinated. The whole family is. And it's sort of getting back to normal. People are really trying to get back to work. There's lots and lots of projects going on out there. Lots of auditioning and things that I'm working on myself. Moving towards directing and all that, and writing and things like that, which is something I pursued more while the pandemic was happening. I found myself writing and doing that kind of stuff. So I've been busy.
And I've got to say, obviously the pandemic stopped a lot of things, but it gave everyone a chance to, I suppose, take a step back and value everything in their lives, their loved ones, their jobs, and that creativeness that's come out of the pandemic is obviously apparent because so many projects are now flourishing, and it's really nice to see everyone back. I mean, the UK, believe it or not, is scrapping all restrictions on Monday. So
yes, I heard that.
Which I'm not a massive fan of. Having two little girls myself and having to go through it all and be a key worker as well and worked all the way through the pandemic. It's not nice environment to be in. But as you said, we're going to continue wearing masks. We're going to keep our distance and get through it. Urge everyone to get jabbed and get that vaccine and get that herd immunity. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's kind of depressing how many people are, against getting a vaccination, or they believe some of the rumors that it could do all sorts of things to you and whatnot. But yes, it's we just got to get through it. It's a frightening thing. But it for sure, people have on so many different levels are rethinking things. I was listening to the radio about minimum wage here in the United States you cannot live on, and so many companies that's all they are providing, or less than minimum wage in many cases. And there's this, it's like, what are they calling it? A mass walkout or something like that, where people are just not going back to work because they don't like their job. They're not getting paid enough, which is interesting. It'll be interesting to see how everything unfolds. I think it's kind of been this reset. And I don't think it's a negative one either. I think it could be very, very positive.
And there's definitely positive things at the end of the tunnel, and you being on the show is definitely bringing a ray of sunshine to people's eyeballs and ears. So before we talk about your wonderful career, I wanted to ask, why acting? Why choose a profession that's so competitive and can be cutthroat? I mean, what attracted you to acting, of all things?
Well, I didn't really choose acting. Acting kind of chose me in a way. I was a dancer, and I was living in London, as a matter of fact, training at a school, a performing arts school, which was primarily dance, but also offered theater class and singing and all kinds of performing arts. So I kind of had this great foundation, really, and I auditioned as a dancer for this movie one day by chance, literally by chance. I really just kind of tagged along with a couple of friends, not being prepared at all with, material to audition with or anything, but it was a dance audition primarily. And the director saw me and kind of pulled me out of the crowd and asked me if I could act. So of course I said yes. I'm not going to say, "Oh, sorry, no, I don't do anything." But anyway, he had me audition for the lead role, and I ended up getting it. So it really was a case of although I've been performing for a long time in a different kind of area primarily. It kind of just fell in my lap in a strange sort of way, and I just tried to keep it moving forward after that.
That's wonderful. And you were born in Canada, but if I'm right in saying you've got English descent, and when I read this fact, I had goosebumps. The reason for that is because I'm born and bred in Nottingham, which, from the facts online,
kidding.
is that your grandfather was born in Nottingham. Is that correct?
That's correct. On my mother's side, yes.
How
Yeah, we
bizarre.
have all sorts of relatives in that area for sure. We're probably cousins or something.
Who knows? Who knows? We've got a big family, our Garners, so you never know. But it was really bizarre because I was reading trivia, and a lot of the time it's just made up stuff. And when I saw
Yeah.
Nottingham, I thought, no, get out of it. Of all places.
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah. So you studied in London. How was it to spend your early years staying in London? Because did you stay in the capital, or were you staying on the outskirts?
No, I was right in London in where was I? Geez. Okay. Like near Regent's Park. I'm sorry,
Right.
I'm just completely blank. I actually stayed for a long time at the YWC in Mornington Crescent, YWCA in Mornington Crescent. Um, and yeah, so I was right in town there. I would walk to my dance class every day. But we had been to, we have a lot of relatives in England in general and Scotland actually, and we had been there several times while I was growing up, so it wasn't completely unfamiliar to me. I had kind of a comfort zone with it. When I was trying to figure out where I would go to train, I was thinking, well, Toronto, which would be a big city in Canada, comparatively speaking, or New York, which scared me. Toronto, kind of the idea was like, sort of meh, you know. New York freaked me out, the idea of going to New York. But London kind of fell somewhere in the middle. So that's why I chose to go there. It just sort of felt like more of a natural kind of progression. And there was a little bit of a comfort zone there.
And has London changed over the years since, when you were there compared to now?
Compared to now, well, I haven't been, well, I guess I've been to a convention or two in London, actually, in more recent years. Um, I just my sense of it, I don't really feel like it's changed that much. I mean, it's such an old, established city. I guess there have been a lot of like modern architecture and things like that since I've been there. But I mean, I when I go to London, I always just sort of feel how I felt when I lived there before. This kind of,
Mm,
this ancient place that has such culture. I feel
mm,
that like that totally still exists today.
mm. And it's got an awesome theatre district as well, the West End. Some awesome
Hmm.
shows. But you
Of
are a
course,
very
yes.
successful actress, and you've got the back catalogue, which is so impressive. I mean, at what point in your career did you feel, do you know what? I'm really good at this.
I don't know that I've ever felt that exactly. you
Really?
know, well, like when you said, when in the introduction you said it's such a competitive business. Why on earth would you choose it? Well, it is so competitive, and there's no absolute. Like you can't just sort of all of a sudden wake up one day and say, "Well, I've got this figured out." It just doesn't happen. Every new role is a challenge in its own way. You always have somebody nipping at your heels, competitive wise, and there's never been a moment where I woke up and said, "Oh, I've got this all. I've made it now." And would I would wager that there are very few actors who feel that way, and if they do, I think that they're probably in trouble. Because again, it's just like every role with any luck is different, so
Mm,
it sort of presents itself with a whole bunch of new challenges, and it's hard work. It's really, really hard
mm,
work to on so many different levels, not only just memorizing lines, that's one part of it, but trying to get inside the character and making it your own, and then hoping that, working with the director, and just the whole process is extremely
mm,
challenging, and but that's what makes it so interesting as well.
mm.
And
I,
yeah.
I mean, who was your biggest inspiration? You know, when you were growing up and you wanted to go into dance and acting, who did you
Mm.
sort of have on your wall? Who was the person that you thought were amazing?
Well, I thought I had a picture of Paul Newman on my wall.
That's a good
I don't
start.
know if,
He's a good actor.
yeah, well, he is, in my opinion, or was one of the most underrated actors. And I think that one of the reasons is because he was so good looking. I mean, that's why I had him
Mm.
on my wall, because I just thought he was really, really good looking. In terms of dance, I remember in Canada there was a prima ballerina named Karen Kane. Although ballet wasn't my forte,
Mm.
she was very inspiring. Growing up, I didn't have this concept that that's what I was going to be as an actor. So I wasn't sort of, and we were really a big, huge movie going family, even. I
Mm.
mean, Julie Andrews, I loved her and everything that she did. I loved musicals. We would buy like the albums of different classic Julie Andrews musicals, and I would memorize everything. I was big on, memorizing albums, and then record albums back then, right? And if I was ever alone in the house, I would put them on and just sing at the top of my lungs. I loved doing that. Um, but to say that there was one person that inspired me to be an actor is difficult. I mean, there's so many wonderful actors that I watch these days that are you try to you know tap into, I guess, on some level, or think, how did they do that? And mostly I've come up with, in all my years doing this, is um, is confidence in your choices, and just really enjoy what you're doing. Just enjoy
Mm.
it and make it your own, because you just there's no point in trying to duplicate somebody else, acting is such a subjective thing, and all you can do is try to be after the work that you put into individual characters, just try to be as organic as possible, because being on camera, the audience sees everything. They see everything that is going on behind the eyes, and it's very difficult to pretend that you're acting, or pretend that you're this character, or you have to really become it on a certain level.
I mean, looking back at like when you started out, how different would you say it is now for a female to break through now compared to when you did?
Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard question, because I'm so not in that position anymore. I'm like the older woman now. So I'm not exactly certain what young actresses go through these days. For me, it was a very sort of hands-on, face-to-face. Of course, there was no internet or anything like that, and that seems to be very, very important in terms of work. And if there's circumstances, if you have enough followers, that'll help you get a job. There's also access to the internet in terms of creating your own content, which I think a lot of actors do nowadays. Not only creating their own content as far as making their own movies or whatever, but of course, YouTube obviously, and TikTok and Instagram, all these things really seem to have a big influence, especially on the younger actors, in terms of where their career might go. For me, it was so different, because it was really just literally pounding the pavement. If you were lucky enough to have an agent who would set up auditions for you, it was all a lot of driving. Los Angeles is a big driving town, sprawling. You spent a lot of time in your car going from one audition to another, and there would be several a day, perhaps. Now it's like all online. That's a huge adjustment for my generation. Trust me, trying to figure out all this like self-tape stuff, and it's just not the same. I used to really love auditioning, like going into the room with the director and the producer and the casting person. I really loved that, because you had like some context, some communication. Now it's like you have these self-tape auditions that are the size of a thumbnail that somebody might be looking at on their phone, and they just swipe left if after a certain number of seconds if they don't think that you look right or something like that, as opposed to having some intimate interaction, which I feel like is really important, because this is somebody you're going to have to be working with, and you want to know who they are. And you want to know who they are as people, I would think. So it is a whole different, it's a whole different universe now. And I don't like it as much, I have to say. I miss, of course, the pandemic just wiped out all kind of intimate communication, or contact, I should say, but in many different ways. but yeah, I do miss that so much.
I mean, I've got to say, I suppose auditions is an art in itself, and I suppose if you're in an audition face to face, and they wanted you to, I don't know, do your sides a little bit different, you would have that chance. But I suppose a self-tape, you've got one chance at delivering what you would think is the perfect audition, which is good on one hand, because you can keep on recording it, but not good on the other, because obviously if the casting director doesn't like it, as you said, swipe to the left and you've gone.
I'm gone. I have no chance. There's no redemption whatsoever. It's like you make a choice and you just pray that that's something that will be interesting to them. It's tough. It's really tough
Mm,
trying to stand out in a crowd, because also they can audition so many people now, because they don't have
mm,
to do anything. They don't have to set up appointments. They don't have to have a space. They don't have to do anything. It's like it's all sort of up to the actor, and you just sort of keep your fingers crossed and hope that there's something in there that is unique and catches their attention, and
mm,
maybe they'll give you a second chance with a callback or something. But it's hard. It's very, very hard.
mm,
But again, this is what kids do. I mean, their whole it's almost like an extension of their body.
mm.
The internet, so it's more of a learning curve for somebody like me, where the internet sort of happened when I was, halfway through my life practically. Um, uh, anyway, it's very challenging, but again, for those who are just growing up and that's all they know, they're
Mm,
growing up in the business and that's it. That's what they know. It's just a different experience. Um,
mm.
I'm the one that has to adjust. My generation is the one that has to like figure it all out, and it's not easy.
No, it's not. It's not easy, bless you. But we're going to go backwards in time. 37 years ago, we
Oh,
got the
Lordy.
release of The Last Starfighter.
I know,
So
37 years ago today, right? I know,
yeah,
it's
that's
incredible.
crazy. And
I
do you know what?
know.
It's one of my all-time favorite movies. I can remember
Oh,
being a kid and renting the VHS and watching it for the first time, and even to this day, I think it still holds up as an awesome movie. It really, really does. I mean, talking about auditions, obviously, when you went for
hmm
the role of Maggie,
hmm
what information did you have before you went to the audition? I mean, what did the advert say, or what did your agent say that you were going for?
Well, I think that basically, first of all, it was, I suppose, 36 years ago that I auditioned for it. So I lost a few of the details along the way. And also, you kind of, you do this project or whatever, you do the whole process. I was doing lots and lots of auditions all at once at that time. And it was sort of like 15 or 20 years later that all of a sudden the last Starfighter came up, and people were talking about it again. You know what I mean? So it's like there
Mm,
was that whole lag time where I sort of put it to the back of my mind. So all of those little tiny details I sort of forget. But I mean, Maggie was sort of the character that I was auditioning for a lot, kind of the girl next door sort of a thing. So I kind of had that character down. I was doing Days of Our Lives, the soap opera here at that time as well, and my character Kayla Brady was the same sort of character. Um, so I mean, I don't think though that I got to read the script ahead of time. That doesn't happen very often. Lance talks about how he insisted on getting a script. He doesn't want to do an audition without knowing what it is he's getting into, especially when
mm,
I mean, his role, he was carrying the movie. So that's a little more at stake there. Um, but it was, as far as I can remember, it was a pretty typical audition. A lot of the same actors, were there that I would audition with a lot of times. And it, I auditioned. I got a call back, and the callback, I was paired with Lance, and we read together. He and I kind of sat and talked about the characters a little bit before we auditioned. Did the callback, and I don't remember what scene we actually read, but I remember we had to improvise a little bit. They said, "Okay,
mm.
you're at the lake." And you're lying there, and you're just kind of like, your boyfriend and girlfriend, you've been together for a while, you're just lying at the lake enjoying yourself. What would you be doing, kind of a thing? And it really had nothing to do with the script at all. It was improvising. So I do remember kind of lying on the floor and looking up at the stars. I'm talking to Lance. So but there were a lot of kind of like A-list actors up for the same role. I think they sort of wanted somebody less well known. It's a small film. Um, and they wanted the audience to really be to relate to it more, and maybe the lesser known actors would take that kind of stigma off it. So I was, of course, really, really pleased to get the role, and it was just one of the most lovely experiences as an actor for me.
I mean, it looks like it was so much fun to film, and Lance, who's
Yeah.
been on the show a little while
Mm-hmm.
ago, is such a card. He
Mm-hmm.
really is. I mean, what was it
It
like
is.
filming the film, and what's your fondest memory of your time on set?
Yeah. Yes, Nick Castle, the director, is just a lovely man. He. We were all very young, obviously. He works really, really well with younger actors. It really did feel sort of like a labor of love, the whole thing.
Mm.
Um, yeah, there was just this sense of, I don't know, just I always felt just very, very relaxed, and there was just sort of this sense of kind of subdued joy, on the set,
Yeah.
real creativity. I mean, Lance and I got along great. He and I are still really good friends to this day. Um, it was just a lovely experience. I mean, the worst part about it, I'll start with that, is that I did a lot of night shooting, and I hate night
Mm.
shooting. I hate it. My body never adjusts to night shooting. Um, and actually, I was also still shooting Days of Our Lives at that time. So there was a couple of days where I'd be on the set of Days of Our Lives and then have to, get on the set of The Last Starfighter out in the Antelope Valley or whatever. So it could be challenging and a little bit tiring, but overall it was a lovely experience. And like one of my favorite scenes is actually at the lake. That whole sequence where, he's saying he's the beta unit at that point, and he's saying all the
Mm.
wrong things, and then he gets shot, and this thing squirts out, which was pretty funny. And then I loved the sort of action of leaping in the truck and driving, towards that alien pod or whatever it was, and the as there's the drama and the romanticness of the thing exploding in the background and looking up to the sky and the wind's blowing, and I love you, Alex Rogan. I mean, I love that part. That was so much fun for me.
And it's got better over age. It really has. I mean, what do you think is the magical source of that movie? Why do you think it connects so well
Mm-hmm.
to this day to people?
Well, I just think because, personally, I think because the characters are so sort of relatable in a way. It takes place today. I mean, yes, we shot it in the 80s, but it could still be today. It was just a
Mm.
humble little trailer park in the middle of nowhere with these humble characters. But I think that the Maggie and Alex characters are living in such a pivotal time in their life. They're graduating from high school, and they're trying to decide what they're going to do with the rest of their lives, and they're trying to get into colleges, and everybody can relate to that. And then, but they don't get to experience the fantasy of
Mm.
what Alex ends up going through as this incredibly good, computer game player.
Mm.
You know, um, to actually play the real thing in outer space. I mean, so to go from this sort of trailer park to outer space and saving the universe is like a fantasy, but I think at its core that the characters are real to people and relatable.
Mm.
And so people can invest in these characters. It's not just hyper action, hyper special effects constantly through the whole thing, just blasting you as you go through. It's a real kind of narrative, about
Mm.
real characters. That's my
And
theory anyway, that people can relate to it.
and when I was younger, I thought those special effects were groundbreaking. I just thought everything about it was absolutely amazing. And there were rumors,
Mm.
and there've been rumors for years about a
Hmm.
sequel, and obviously something to do with
Hmm.
rights. Obviously, if there were a sequel, I presume you'd put your hand up and say yes, please.
Yes,
Which,
please.
yeah,
Hello, over here.
which direction would you like to see you go in? Into the sequel. I mean, would you want to be? I mean, obviously the years have gone on. Do you think you would have kids and they would be the next Last Starfighter?
Right. Yes, absolutely. I think that, there have been a lot of just different ideas bounced around for sure. The first time that I even heard about a sequel was, probably 10 or 15 years ago. Nick Castle and Lance and I all went for lunch, and he was talking about a script that he had written that and he kind of described what he sort of thought would happen to the characters. And yes, we would be parents, and it would have something to do with our child, maybe, I don't know, discovering that his father was the last Starfighter or something like that. The latest generation of ideas are, so Jonathan Betchell, the original writer, got the rights back. So he's also sort of been stewing in the Last Starfighter juices for a while too, in terms of coming up with an idea of it. And I don't really know any more than what's online, although we do have a little more contact with like Nick. I think Nick Castle will still be involved, and certainly Jonathan Betchell, which is great because I feel like it hopefully will hold up in terms of integrity, for the original theme and whatnot. But there's definitely scenes that include Alex and Maggie as parents. It would be really fun to be a Starfighter myself too. But we'll see. I might be too old. I'll be in a wheelchair by the time this thing comes out.
Get out of it. You're not that old. You'll be up there fighting those aliens. But going from Alex playing on that arcade game to you playing on an arcade game, The Tempest in Night of the Comet. Good old Regina.
Yeah, that's right.
What an awesome movie. And you realise how difficult it is to get hold of that movie on DVD. Or on anything. It's become a collector's item. In the UK, we can't get it. I mean, I watched it years ago. But obviously, you play Regina Belmont in this awesome movie. It's actually good fun, and it's just brilliant. And again, another film that we should get a sequel to, because it definitely leaves it open at the end. So you went off the back of The Last Starfighter. Obviously, did you get this role because of The Last Starfighter, or did you have to audition once again?
I did have to audition, but The Last Starfighter, I think my sort of cred, I guess, was heightened with The Last Starfighter. I again, long time ago, so I don't remember the exact sequence of events, but I believe that I didn't have to do an initial kind of audition with like a casting director and then pass that phase and move on. I think I moved right to auditioning with somebody who they sort of put me with as my sister, as Sam, and we auditioned together. And Kelly Maroney auditioned with somebody else who was more like blonde and, fairer than me, I guess. So when I got the role, you can imagine my surprise when we ended up in the same room together. It was like, oh, I didn't expect to see you here. But yeah, I think that, but of course, we didn't necessarily look a lot alike physically. And honestly, many siblings don't. But we really did seem to have some great chemistry, in terms of, our characters were very, very different. Kelly and I are very, very different, but we're still really good friends to this day. It just worked out really, really well, I think.
And your character in Night of the Comet, I've got to say, is pretty kick-ass. You see her wielding the Uzi and fighting the zombies. Did you get any training for that? Because I can't imagine you on a Saturday afternoon, shooting an Uzi and then going for lunch and a vino with the girls. I mean, I mean,
Right,
did you
right.
do
Oh no,
training?
that's absolutely my lifestyle all the time. I just carry Uzis
Awesome.
around. It was actually a Mac 10. Remember, it's
Right.
like they kept jamming. Daddy would have gotten
Oh,
us Uzis.
yes, of course. Yeah,
And the
sorry.
story goes actually, yeah, right. The story goes that if you look at the photo, there's a photograph in the very beginning of Sam and Reg and Dad, who's the Green Beret, right? That's Tom Eberhardt, the director. And so, and the story goes that he really wanted Uzis, and they were too cheap. I mean, the budget on this thing was very low, so Mac 10s were apparently a lot cheaper. And so, when and somehow Tom predicted that they wouldn't be great, that they would jam and whatnot. And
Mm,
so when we were doing that scene where we're shooting the car, right, practicing, I guess, with the Mac 10s, it kept jamming and jamming and jamming. And when Sam was shooting, and so Tom was like, knew that. So that whole part of the scene was kind of like made up on the spot. It was like, I think Tom gave Kelly that line, Daddy would have got us Uzis, literally meaning Tom Eberhardt would have had Uzis on the set had it not been, such a low budget. So there's this sort of, little subtle dig, I think.
mm.
So Daddy would have got us Uzis, yeah. But the Mac 10 submachine gun was practically made for housewives. So what the heck? Just
And to be
quoting the
honest,
movie all over the place here.
I'm English, so I wouldn't know the difference between any gun. To be fair, so I
Right?
do. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I
to me,
don't
it's a gun's a
either.
gun.
Yeah. Oh, yes, and they're all pretty nasty. I don't know the difference
Mm,
either. I'm not. I have no idea about guns. We did, to answer your question, by the way, we did have to train.
mm,
We were taken to a firing range and shot off, the Uzis and whatnot. But of course, there were blanks in there. We weren't actually shooting anything, but just having a weapon on set,
mm,
they're very, very, very careful always, and so they should be, because there's been
mm.
some pretty nasty accidents in the past. So,
Yeah, I can imagine.
yeah, but we had to learn how to handle the gun for sure.
And that film as well has become like a cult classic. It really has. It's like you've definitely got the Midas touch to films. You really have. I mean, with that, why do you think it's so loved again to this day? Because to quote this, Josh Whedon actually
Mm-hmm.
said that this was a big influence for him for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So
Mm-hmm.
technically, you are the influence for Buffy. Which
Yeah,
is pretty
well,
awesome.
mostly Sam, because the cheerleader thing and all that stuff is the
Yeah,
influence.
no, you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, she's kind of like a hybrid, isn't she, Buffy?
Mm,
She's sort of that tough chick, but she's also like a cheerleader, right? Or whatever.
yeah,
Anyway, yeah,
yeah.
that's a massive compliment for sure. Um, you know, it's just luck. I don't know, this kind of cult film status thing that people talk about. I mean, I think, all these other movies that were shot around the same time, Back to the Future, I don't know, it goes on and on and on. These massive movies, I'm sure, have a much bigger fan base. But it is incredible how passionate the fans are about these little movies. And I think maybe
Mm,
part of the reason is because they're little. Maybe they're proud of the fact that they're,
mm,
such big fans of movies that maybe not everybody on planet Earth saw, but they
mm,
really do hold up. And again, I think that, one of the reasons I loved this script was because Reggie was as tough as she was, as opposed to kind of what I've been playing a lot, which was the girl next door kind of a thing.
mm,
And I always felt that Reggie was more like me, you know. I I had to dig more to be the girl next door and kind of like kind of person. I grew up with two older brothers, and just trying to keep up with them all the time. And I was always pretty physically active, and so I related more to the Reg character, I would say.
mm.
Probably sassy. I was pretty sassy as a kid too. But I think again, the characters are sort of relatable on some level. You know, these just normal kids that people can sort of relate to are all of a sudden the last people on earth as far as they know. And I what I also like is that it it gives the audience a chance to imagine that they can survive stuff too. You know, it doesn't
Mm.
have to be some superhero who sweeps in and rescues everybody. It's just going to be a couple of kids. And I've heard so many different stories about how you know people can relate to the characters. Like one person just the other day was saying she grew up as a military brat, so
Mm.
they move around a lot. They really have to become sort of independent, have this sense of independence, and to be able to really look after themselves. And she said, you know, I watched this movie and I could relate to it. On you, she said, which was such a nice compliment. You guys really uh, really portrayed these characters in a way I could relate to. They were independent. Could look after themselves. They weren't like, you know, they didn't have these helicopter parents. It wasn't a big deal. I mean, but Tom
Mm.
tells the story. The director tells the story about he loves this kind of apocalyptic kind of uh, narrative where you know something awful happens and the entire city is left empty, and how you survive that. And he had this idea of, well, what if it was a couple of teenage girls? So he did some interviewing with teenage girls, and to his surprise, it was like they weren't, you know, devastated and falling apart. They were like, "This is excellent. You mean our parents aren't around anymore, and we can do whatever we want?"
Oh
They thought
dear,
it
it's
was the greatest
dangerous.
thing ever. So he built it from that, which is hilarious in itself. I mean, it's such a great foundation for the story, which is also such a wonderful. That another thing about the Comet is it's unique in that it has so many different elements. You know, the
Mm.
zombies, the apocalypse, the comedy. You know,
Mm.
it's a unique combination. You don't see that very often. I can't even put my finger on any other movie really that combines all that stuff in kind of I feel like sort of a subtle way. You know, it's not a
Mm.
comedy. You can't really tag it as a comedy. Um, you can't tag it as a horror movie. You can't really tag it as a pure apocalyptic kind of a thing. I think that makes it stand out.
And do you think we'll ever see a sequel to it, or because it leaves in such a way that actually it's completely open? I mean, you see DMK
Mm.
driving off in his Mercedes, I think it was. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
you starting a life. I mean, it would be great to get
Mm-hmm.
a sequel. It really would.
Yeah, to see what happened with old Reg and Hector.
Mm, mm. Yeah, with the kids as
Yeah,
well, and it'd be wicked. Be really
yeah.
good.
Just starting all over again. Yes, I mean, absolutely. It did leave it wide open, but Tom Eberhart who also now has the rights again to it.
Mm,
There was this rule that came up. I don't know how long ago, maybe 10 years ago, where writers were given back rights after 30 years because Universal owned it for all that time, and nobody
mm,
could get a hold of it. Um, or buy the rights. I don't think even Kelly Maroney, excuse me, tried to get the rights to the
mm,
movie to make a sequel, but could not do it. So I know there was an attempt to do a remake for a minute or two, but that fell through. But Tom has no real interest in making a sequel, so I don't
mm.
know if that's in the cards. And I'm not a
Oh,
big remake person,
no,
because it's never
no.
the same.
No, I mean the thing is, when something's such a cool classic, when you remake it, I just think I don't know, it poops on the previous version, and it's never going to be good because we have that nostalgia about that feeling of watching
Mm,
that movie. So if they did remake it, doesn't matter how good they remake it, it won't
yeah.
feel the same. So I wanted to speak to
Yeah,
you
it won't be the same.
I wanted to speak to you about a wonderful movie. I don't know if you get asked a lot about this movie, but The Sea Wolf, because it's quite different
Yes.
to what you've done previously, and you play
Mm.
Flaxen Brewster. Is it Brewster?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Brewster, yeah.
And it's such a wonderful movie. How did the role come about for you? Because this was only a TV movie, and yet again,
Mm-hmm.
one of the hardest movies to obtain on DVD or VHS.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, how did the role come about for you?
I think it was an offer. They offered it to me. I got to a point in my career where I was just getting offers, which is really, really nice. That's not happening anymore because
Mm.
I didn't work for quite a while. So, and I got kind of out of the loop, and I moved to New York, and that definitely changed up my career. But at that point, yeah, I was. It was an offer, so of course I was interested. I mean, it's a classic novel, first of all, and I loved the idea of doing that kind of a period piece. I'd never done anything like that
Mm.
before. So, and working. I mean, Charles Bronson and Christopher Reeve. I mean, who would turn that down? So
Mm.
and they also, I think part of the reason I was offered it was because it was shot in Vancouver and I'm Canadian. So I think that helped because
Mm.
when you shoot in Canada, they want Canadian content, you know, for like the first or second lead needs to be Canadian and that kind of a thing.
Mm.
So that probably helped in their choice of me. But yeah, oh, it was fantastic. I mean, you really felt like you were in that era. I mean, the costumes were fantastic. We would take this ship out, this tall mast ship out into the ocean every day and shoot on that, which was really cool. You know, we all helped to raise the sails and do all that stuff and go all on out there and we also, I mean, just being in the middle of the ocean in the Pacific Northwest, we saw a lot of orca and all sorts of
Wow.
incredible sea life. I remember one time we were shooting a scene and all of a sudden this orca jumped out of the ocean and splashed down, you know, in a very National Geographic picture perfect way. Everything stopped. Everybody ran to that side of the ship and we were taking pictures, you know, and the director's like, wait, stop, I gotta keep shooting. No, we have to look at this. So that way it was a really challenging and incredible experience. It was challenging on so many levels because this was a character I really hadn't kind of played before,
Mm.
um, and she goes from sort of being this I don't know, sneaky thief kind of a person that steals from Christopher Reeve's character to being, lost on the open ocean and picked up basically by a pirate ship, and all just that you just she ran the gambit. One of the hardest scenes was where, because near the beginning of the movie, these two ships collide and the ship that we're on sinks, and I end up on this little dinghy with Christopher Reeve in the open ocean. And what they had set up was this giant wave machine. I mean, I'm sure they didn't set it up. I'm sure it was something that existed. But all those scenes, like, especially when the dinghy pulls up to the Sea Wolf and we're supposed to get on board or escape from it or something, one of the two. I guess actually that might have been escaping from it because when we're picked up by the Sea Wolf, we're just floating on flotsam or something.
Mm.
Yes, they had these waves going, these artificial waves, and we had to climb overboard into this little dinghy. Literally, I thought I was going to die.
Wow.
It took every strength, every fiber of strength in my body to like hold on to the ship as we're getting in. And because you wouldn't believe how violent it was. So that was
Mm.
pretty challenging, but it was, I loved shooting that movie. I thought it was an excellent movie. Um, Charles Bronson and I stayed in touch afterwards until he passed away quite a while ago now. We're still really good friends with his wife. And tragically, Christopher Reeve had his
Mm.
jumping accident I didn't see him for years and years later until he was doing some event in New York, and my husband and I went, and I went backstage and said hello to him, and he was very, very nice to me. But he was quadriplegic by that time, and then the tragedy of his whole life. But I mean the movie itself, I think, is really a wonderful movie with a terrific cast.
And what was Reeve like to perform opposite? Because Christopher Reeve, for me, is my all-time idol. Absolutely love Superman.
Yes.
I think he's an awesome man. He's got some great kids, and it just shows, his, their upbringing, especially Will. I mean, what was he like to work with? Was he, good, or I don't
He was
say anything
fantastic. I
horrible.
mean, no, yeah, no, I hated him. No,
Yeah.
he was, well, Will had just been born when we were shooting that. So he was kind of struggling with being awake at night, looking after Will. Well, his wife was there, Dana, I believe, as well. But they were both there and living in this apartment in Vancouver and with a newborn baby. So you can imagine it was a lot. But no, he's like, Christopher Reeve was like the quintessential actor, just very serious, very, very professional. Yeah, wonderful. It was almost like working with a Shakespearean actor or something like that. I learned a lot from him, for sure.
Well, that is nice to hear, because
Yeah.
we don't tend to get many people that have worked opposite Chris. I mean, I've
Mm.
interviewed a few of the cast of the Superman movies, so Sarah
Uh-huh.
Douglas and Jack O'Halloran,
Hmm.
and they've said it was very, very nice, and it'll always be remembered. And I wrote a really nice letter to Will not
Oh,
long
did
ago,
you?
and he sent me back a letter, and I wanted to know, what sort of man Christopher was as a father, and what sort of lessons he taught him, and he actually
Hmm.
turned around and he said that he always said, "Give more than you take, and leave the world a better place than you found it," which I think's
Hmm.
such nice things to say.
Hmm.
And definitely with my
Fantastic.
girls, I would definitely live that way. So going on, lastly, before we end this wonderful conversation, conventions. Have you got any
Mhm.
planned coming up with the pandemic? And
Um, yeah, well, apparently the conventions are back, full force. I don't have any coming up specifically. There's a couple in the air, but nothing is set in stone yet. So, and nothing, even those not until the fall. So I'm
Mhm.
not really saying anything about that. I've done a couple in London, which I loved. I just love London. The first time I took my son, and the second time my husband and I went. So I just love going back there. I did live when I was first there training as a dancer. I lived in town, but when I moved back after I did The Apple, the first movie that I did,
Mm.
I lived in Sunbury on Thames, which I love. We went back there, and the local pub, the guy still remembered me.
Oh
That's
wow.
kind of a cultural. I know. I love that is a cultural thing that I miss so terribly, in the US and any place else, really. It's like the pub was like your living room.
Mm.
Um, and you knew the owner, and you just saw the regular faces all the time, played the darts, all that stuff. I really, really miss that. And I loved living there. It's a beautiful place.
Mm.
So we would go back there and visit and whatnot. And my husband, while I was doing the convention, went to Hampton Court and did all the, Big Ben, and did all the stuff um, that you're supposed to
So
do when you go.
fingers crossed, we could have you over in the UK very, very soon. I mean,
Yes,
do you enjoy doing conventions? Is it something that's a pleasure?
absolutely. Because, everybody is always just so incredibly kind, and they always sort of informed me about the movies that I've been in, because generally know more about movies than I do, the movies that I'm in.
Yeah.
um, so that's always kind of fun. But also, it's really wonderful meeting the people that like your work. Of course, it's in an ego way it is, but it's also, I mean, honestly, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all those people. So having a chance to be able to give back a little bit is is really really nice. If if somebody wants to meet me, I feel grateful for that, because where else do you get something like that? And if you don't kind of um, acknowledge that or appreciate that, then what's the point? I mean, the only reason we do what we do is for the audience. So to get to say hello to the audience that really likes what you do is a privilege, I think.
And who do you get recognised for the most? At conventions, what do you sign the most? Is it Night of the Comet, Last Starfighter?
I would say probably Night of the Comet, Last Starfighter, and Weekend at Bernie's are the three big ones.
Wow. So I'll make sure that if you're ever in the UK, I'll get a nice print of the sea wolf, and it will throw you off guard.
Yes.
You sign that. You'll be
my gosh.
Oh no, what's going on?
No, that would be fantastic, because every once in a while somebody will show up and ask for something, some random thing that I've done. I have, like, we sign photographs and whatnot. I have pretty much everything, almost everything that I've ever done. I have one or two photos if in case of emergency. I think I have one in the dinghy with Christopher Reeve that I talked about.
Wow.
Photo. Yeah. There was just a quick story. The very first movie I ever did was The Apple. It was a futuristic rock musical. Pretty weird movie. But at one convention, somebody came to my table dressed as my character, who was this futuristic rock musician. So the outfit was just crazy, but it was a duplicate of what it was that I actually wore. So that was pretty, I was just like, wow, I can't believe you did that. That was so cool. It was very, very cool.
That is awesome, and I'll have to try and track down that picture of you and Chris in the dinghy because I've got a Christopher Reeve signed lobby card of him and Jane Seymour together in a boat in somewhere in time. So it would just be picture perfect for you and Chris to get that signed by yourself in the future. But Catherine, thank you so much for spending a bit of time with me over in the UK. I'm sure that people are going to love this interview. What is next for you? Are you putting your feet up and relaxing, doing jigsaws?
Well, actually, we are. I'm in North Carolina. Like I said, we're sort of at the beach, and when we're here, we do an enormous number of jigsaw puzzles. Actually, we did an enormous number of jigsaw puzzles during the entire pandemic year. But we've got these 1,000-piece. We're working on our second one right now as I speak. My husband and my daughter are working on it. We just finished one yesterday. A John Singer Sargent, and a beautiful painting of John Singer Sargent's. And this one is more of I'm not sure who the artist is, but it's more of a modern theme. So yeah, we do a lot of jigsaw puzzles. But honestly, I feel like I've been busier this last year or two than I have for years and years. Because I've been sort of developing my own projects, which take an enormous amount of time and focus and energy. So I try to take as much time, with my family as I can, but I have a self-tape audition after this that I have to do. And I'm working on in August, I'll be flying to LA because I'm directing a play and we're doing a table read. So I've been preparing for that. And then I have another project, a script that I wrote with a partner, that has been optioned in Canada. So we have to stay on top of all that stuff. So yeah, it's that I'm going to direct. So it's busy. It's really, really busy, but I love it.
And we can keep tabs, as they say, on the progress on Instagram and Twitter, because you're both on those. I've
on
got
both of
Catherine
those.
Mary Stewart on Instagram, and then on Twitter it's CMS All.
Yep.
Which fans can follow you and check out
Mhm.
the progress of upcoming projects. Catherine, look after
That's right.
yourself,
I
keep
will. I'm
safe,
also
and
on
stay
Facebook, by the
super.
way, just so you know. There's a page, my page on Facebook where I spend a lot of time and I update everything on there as well. Catherine Mary Stewart. So yes, thank you.
It is a pleasure. Look after yourself. As I said, keep safe,
I will.
and
You
all
too.
the best to the family. And
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll see you very, very soon in the UK at a convention.
I hope so. I hope that would be fantastic. I'd love it. I'd love to go back to the UK.